Hello and welcome to Understanding Approaches, the program that takes you inside the mindset of the various modalities in the counselling world. Today on the program, we'll be talking about psychodynamic counselling, and here to talk with me about it is Brendan McLoughlin. Brendan, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you very much for asking me, Neil.
Now, from what I gather, psychodynamic seems to find its roots way back, even before many other forms of counselling. Can you tell us a bit more about the history and where psychodynamic counselling came from?
I can certainly try. The beginnings, I suppose, have to go back to Freud. The psychodynamic approach is rooted in the psychoanalytic approach, and that goes back at least 100 years when Freud was beginning. So out of his pioneering work, you get the development of what eventually becomes the psychodynamic approach, which is to do with how the unconscious mind operates in our lives.
Now, when you talk about the unconscious mind, can you tell us a bit about Freud's vision of the self and of the mind and how the human being functioned?
Yes, I think Freud develops the idea. He's not the first person to talk about the unconscious by any means, but he develops it through his work originally with so-called hysterical patients, mostly female. He begins to pay attention to what might lie behind the symptom, the apparent symptom, whether that's not being able to speak or a limb that's not functioning in the way you'd expect it to, without any organic cause for that. And he eventually postulates the idea that there is an unconscious reason. So the Freudian idea of the self is that there are different levels at which we operate. We consciously operate at a kind of cognitive level. We say I, and we mean the bit that we know about. But beyond that, there are all kinds of things that we don't know about, which nonetheless are part of what you would call the self. And symptoms are the sign that something is operating in the unconscious level and it's affecting the totality of the self in a way that's disturbing to the individual.
Now, when you say hysterical, what do you mean by that?
Well, I probably shouldn't have brought that term in because by and large the sorts of patients that Freud originally began with do not typically present in that way anymore, and that in itself could be a consequence of the way in which all our ideas about psychoanalysis have actually come into the broad culture. But the hysterical, the origins of that term are in the Greek word for the womb. And the idea of hysteria originally was that the womb was somehow moving around the body, wasn't where it needed to be. In practice, the hysterical symptom was one, as I said a moment or two ago, where there was an apparent physical symptom but no organic cause for it. So it might be that there would be no feeling, say, in an arm. But there was an apparent paralysis, but no physical reason for that. So that immediately then becomes a sign for something. It's as if to say that because it was somehow unacceptable or impossible for an individual to consciously pay attention to what they were disturbed by, or they repressed the thing that was disturbing them, that then finds its way into the unconscious and manifests through a hysterical symptom, whatever that might be.
Now, can you tell us a bit about Freud's idea of the ego, the superego, and the id? Can you describe each of them and tell us a bit how they interact and what significance they have in the human psyche?
Well, this is again quite early in Freud's thinking when he's trying to describe the nature of the psyche, and he comes up with this kind of tripartite division: superego, ego, and id. In the original German, they don't use Latin words. They use quite just ordinary words: the Über-Ich, the Ich, and the das Es. So the above I, and the it. And very straightforwardly, the superego is, if you like, the the moral aspect. It's the parental aspect. It says you should or you should not. The it, or the id, is the instinctual aspect. It's the bit of you that wants to do something. I want to do it now. I want to eat, or I want to act in a particular way, and it's a very powerful drive. He thinks of the id as a drive. Now, the ego stands between these two divisions within the psyche, the superego and the id, and it corresponds to your conscious position, the bit of you that's aware of yourself, and it mediates between the powerful kind of authority positions of the superego and the equally powerful kind of anarchic sort of desires and impulses of the id. And in a balanced individual, hopefully, the ego position is one that's able to mediate that dynamic, that dialogue, if you like, between those two bits of the self, and maintain relative harmony for the individual.
Now, in common parlance, there's this term, someone will be accused of having a big ego, and it's usually seen as having an ego is nearly seen as something quite pejorative. What's going on there?
Well, I think what's going on is that we use the same word in different ways. When we're talking about someone having a big ego, I suppose we might mean that they're full of themselves or they're possibly selfish. That's a common way of using that particular word, which is distinct from its very particular way of being used as a kind of a concept within the Freudian canon, as a term that applies to trying to describe distinct areas of the mind. So I don't think you can't say that to have an ego itself is a problem. We all need an ego. We need an operating position that allows us to make decisions and choices, to decide when we want to go forward, when we've had enough, and so on. But having too much of an ego is actually probably more related to a problem which would be defined as narcissism rather than anything else. A person's out of balance, and in being out of balance, they disturb other people. They don't, get the feelings right between themselves and others. They've got too much of an ego.